So we're continuing the reading, Bernard Malmud, The Fixer. And right now, I want to recap. I've decided not to read all the chapters, so I skipped all the way to page 96. And let me recap what happened. So, the Yaakov Bok has arrived in Kiev. He's searching for a job. He's having a hard time finding work. The only work he can find in the Jewish quarter is work in exchange for a bowl of noodle soup. And then he happens to walk outside the Jewish quarter where he's not allowed as a Jew to be, because they had laws in Russia where Jews couldn't go outside. They couldn't live in certain areas. It's not only in Russia, by the way. It was throughout Europe. Jews were not allowed to go in certain areas. So the Nazis did not invent this anti-Semitic rules. And so what happened was that he found a drunken man, Russian man, laying in the snow. He helped him, and it turned out the man had a pin with an emblem of an anti-Semitic organization. The man invited him to his home and offered him a lot of food and offered him a job to work in his factory that produced bricks, and he wanted him to live there because he wanted him to supervise the area, because there was a problem with people that stole bricks from him because they abused the situation where he was a drunk. And he has a daughter, and the daughter tried to seduce Yaakov Bok. Yaakov Bok saw that she was, fortunately, she was in a situation where usually Jews do not have intimate relations. She had a period, and then he all of a sudden remembered his Jewish upbringing, and luckily for him, he did not proceed with that relationship. And then shortly afterwards, the body of a young Russian boy was found, drained of blood with many stab wounds. They accused the Jews of using the blood to make matzahs. This was a very popular blood libel. I think it's still in the Muslim world today. And so for some reason, Passover, which was it's the same time, Passover and Easter are at the same time because of historical reasons. The last meal of Jesus was actually a Passover meal because Jesus was actually a Jew, and he did celebrate Passover as a Jew. So because of this time, and because Easter is a very religious holiday for Christians, because that's the time of the crucifixion. Therefore, there were many blood libels during Easter, Passover, when those two holidays coincide. And it was a bad time to be a Jew in Russia and Europe. There would be pogroms, there would be accusations of using blood to bake matzahs. Matzahs are the flat bread used by Jews during Passover. Jews eat special bread to remind them of coming out of Egypt and the whole story of Egypt and coming out of Egypt and the Exodus. And this is very interesting because it really reminds us of Joseph, who was also in prison. And then there was an attempt to seduce him. And then afterwards, the wife accused of this minister who tried to seduce him, accused Joseph of assaulting her, and he found himself in prison. And so the biblical connections are quite clear. So right now, Yaakov Bok is in prison, and he's accused of murdering the boy. He's accused of having a false identity because he didn't say his Jewish name out of fear. Jews are not allowed to go outside of the Jewish area. They were not allowed to live there or work there. The man never asked for his identification papers, so therefore he didn't know he was a Jew. And then once he found out that Yaakov Bok was indeed a Jew, being a official anti-Semite, because he belonged to this organization in Russia that promotes anti-Semitism, He also found other accusations that he was falsely misled, even though Yaakov Bok only said a false name, and he tried very much not to live there, but he sort of forced him to live there because he wanted him to oversee the bricks, and he was a very honest man, Yaakov, and he caught the other people who were working in the factory stealing, and obviously this was a plot in order to get rid of Yaakov, because once Yaakov is not there, then the thieves can go on taking advantage of the drunken Russian. So right now Yaakov is in jail, and this goes on now. Chapter 3, Part 2. Why does a man tremble? When he was locked in the cell again, there were 3 filthy straw pallets on the floor. One was his. What is misery that he could not think of this as his? What a misery that he could think of this as his. 2 new prisoners were lying on the others. One was a hairy man in rags, the other a living skeleton. Both stank across the room of dirt and poverty. Though neither paid any attention to him, the ragged one blinking at the wall, the other snoring, the fixer kept to the far corner of the cell. He felt abandoned, lost to the world. What will happen to me now? He asked himself. And if it happens bad, who will ever know? I might as well be dead. Recalling his father-in-law and wife, he could conjure neither of them close, especially the wife. He thought of his father and mother, young people in their weedy graves, and their fate gave him no comfort. His frustrated innocence outraged him. He was unjustly accused, helpless, unable to offer proof or be believed. What horror would they accuse him of next? If they knew me, could they say such things? He tried to comprehend what was happening and explain it to himself. After all, he was a rational being, and a man must try to reason. Yet the more he reasoned, the less he understood. The familiar had become evil. What happened next was weight with peril. That he was a Jew, willing or unwilling, was not enough to explain his fate. So the investigation was actually into everything to do with his Jewish identity, and it was difficult for them to accept that he was a liberal person that wasn't really fond of religion. Remembering his life filled him with hatred for the way things went and were going. I'm a fixer, but all my life I've broken more than I fix. What would they accuse me of him of next? How could a man defend himself against such terrible hints, insinuations, accusations, if no one was willing to believe him? They're also not giving him a lawyer to defend him. Panic gnawed him. He was full of desperate thoughts of what to do next. Somehow to sneak out of the cell and seek in the ghetto for the old man to tell the Russians that he had been hit on the head by a rock, and Yaakov had wiped away the blood. So there was an incident, they found a rag with blood, and since the boy was murdered, they thought maybe that would be the blood of the child who was murdered. But at the same time, there was an old man who was hit by rocks in an anti-Semitic attack, and Yaakov, as a good man, took him into his room in the brick factory and cleaned his wound, and that rag was found in his room. So, and the whole story was go find the man now to give evidence. It was very hard to find this person now, because that person just didn't even leave forwarding address or his name. So the fixer goes from home to home, knocking on each thin door and asking for the tzaddik, but nobody knows him. Then in that last house, they know him, a saintly man. This is like a dream he had, because he obviously is in jail. He cannot go from door to door. But he had long ago gone away. The fixer hurriedly travels on the train to Minsk, and after months of desperate searching, meets the old man, the moon on his rabbinic hat, coming home one evening from the synagogue. Please, you must go back to Kiev with me and prove my innocence. Tell the officials I didn't do what they say I did. But the old tzaddik does not recognize the fixer. He looks at him long but shakes his head. This is the old man he helped when he was attacked under anti-Semitic attack. The wound on his temple is healed. He cannot now recall the night Yaakov says he had spent with him in the room above the stall.